The talk you are about to hear is by Sensei Richard von Sturmer. Our Teisho this evening, Thursday the 15th of October, is on Zen and character. And while working on material for this talk, I realized probably in two parts. So this will be part one. And I began thinking about Zen and character when I gave a recent Teisho on Roshi Keplo's first teacher, Daiun Sogaku Harada Roshi. And in his old age, when Philip Keplo knew him at Oshinji, as I mentioned in the Teisho, Harada Roshi had a beloved dog called Deko that accompanied him everywhere when he went out walking in the temple grounds. And some of the monks were jealous of Deko and the affection that Harada Roshi gave to Deko. And when Harada Roshi was away from the temple, traveling in other parts of Japan, they'd mistreat the dog, they'd take it out on the dog. One monk in particular. And this monk, during one sesshin, had kensho. And it was well known at the end of sesshin who got kensho at the end of sesshin. It was publicly announced, or they came up the front. So Philip Keplo knew that this monk, he got kensho. So he watched him carefully to see if his attitude to Deko would change. But it didn't. He mistreated the dog just as before, kicked him or whatever. So there's no change at all. And when Aiken Roshi heard about this story, he commented that Aiken Roshi, sometimes called Philip Keplo Phil, he said that Phil was a bit rash to jump to conclusions, and that given time and the deepening of his insight, this monk's behavior may well have changed. Bottom line is, we don't know. But I think that the monk's character trait of mistreating animals might have gone deep, and that he would not or could not change his behavior towards the dog. Kensho, an initial awakening, is not a cure-all for character defects. And years of zazen can still fail to address those defects. And we'll pick up on this in the second part of the talk. Quite a few times, Aiken Roshi has quoted his teacher, Yamada Roshi, saying, "The purpose of Zen is the perfection of character." The purpose of Zen is the perfection of character. When I read this, I sort of have a little bit of trouble with it on two counts. First, concerning the assumption that character can be perfected. From the very beginning, we are perfect, as the Buddha said in his awakening. From the very beginning, all beings are Buddha, endowed with wisdom and virtue, lacking nothing. But because people's minds have been inverted through delusive thinking, they fail to realize this. That's from the perspective of our true nature. We're perfect from the beginning. As far as character goes, you can also say that there can never be any final perfection. We're all flawed in some respect. We're all works in progress. There's a complex but interesting koan in the Hikiganroku, case 91. Concerns Zen teacher Yangguan. Yangguan asked his attendant, "Bring me the rhinoceros horn fan." The attendant said, "The fan is broken." Yangguan said, "If the fan is broken, bring me the rhinoceros." But the first part, when the attendant says, "The fan is broken," another Zen teacher, Shuedo, comments, "I want that imperfect one. I want that imperfect one." It's okay, just as it is. And the second concern with Yamada's saying the purpose of Zen is the perfection of character is to speak about a purpose or an aim in Zen. If there is a purpose in Zen, it's to realize our true nature. But then we have to put that aside and just give ourselves wholeheartedly to the practice, to the breath or to the koan, without a thought of there's anything to achieve, that there's anything to attain. Being purpose or goal-driven in our practice can really become an obstruction. However, having said all this and giving poor old Yamada Roshi a little bit of a bad time, I do know that people can go through profound transformations in their Zen practice. And Zazen is transformative. Take two types of character, introverts and extroverts. And during our 11, 12 years or so of training at the Rochester Zen Center, I did see introverted, it's probably better to call people inward turning. And let's face it, most of us are sort of inward turning or more introverted than extroverted. So I did see some inward-looking introverted students become less timid and hesitant and more confident in their practice and their interactions with others as time went on. While the few extroverted people in training, I saw they learned to tone themselves down a bit and to become more aware and more sensitive to the people around them. So perhaps we can amend Yamada Roshi's saying to, with years of dedicated Zen practice, there is a refinement of character. A refinement of character. And I certainly think that's true. This is true of Roshi Kapleau. In his early days, long before Amala Roshi and I knew him, he was a fiery and at times abrasive teacher. He didn't suffer fools gladly. He could be sharp-tongued and he didn't hold back correcting his students. I know that from what my teacher, Bodhin Roshi, has said. But Mitra Bishop Roshi, who was his student for many years and then his attendant for several years, reported that in his later years, Roshi Kapleau changed and became more accepting. This was after he retired or was about to retire. As soon as he realized that something about his behavior was not appropriate, he let it go. And our Mitra Roshi was really impressed by his ability in his old age to just let it go. She saw a marked shift as he became more gentle and compassionate in his old age. These qualities were always part of his character, but they came more to the fore in his old age. And certainly that was how Amala and I knew Roshi Kapleau. He could be very sweet and supportive. So this character types, there are a number of typologies that put character into different types in psychology. I mentioned extroverts versus introverts. We get this from Carl Jung. And there are many others, Freudian typologies, all sorts. There's even a book, Buddhist Character Analysis, which explores character in the light of the three poisons: greed, anger, and delusion. So I found flicking through this book, it's rather crude. I wouldn't really recommend it. But based on Pali Suttas, the authors put people into these, but define them by the three poisons. You're either a person who's always desiring things, you're the desiring type, or you're a person who always gets angry, so you're the angry type, or you're a person who's always confused, and that's the deluded type. And of course, we're a mixture of all of these. However, although such typologies can give insight into one's character, I feel they fall short. Why? Because they fail to acknowledge our uniqueness. Each of us, every one of us, is unique. We've never been here before with our body-mind on this earth. There'll never be anyone like us, exactly like us, when we're gone. We can't be boxed in as a particular type, a type imposed on us from the outside. Oh, he's like this, or she's like that. And the writings of the American psychologist James Hillman can be very helpful in this respect. And I'll now read passages from his book, The Soul's Code, In Search of Character and Calling. Late in his career, it became a bestseller for James Hillman. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for many weeks. So Hillman defines character as follows. Character refers to deep structures of personality that are particularly resistant to change. The very word character originally meant a marking instrument that cuts indelible lines and leaves traces. And style comes from stylus in Latin, a sharp instrument for incising characters, for instance, letters. And each of us has our own character and our own style, our own way of being in the world. And we can celebrate our different styles. We can celebrate that at birthdays. And unfortunately, the time we do celebrate is after we're dead, at funerals, when people speak on our behalf and say what a character he or she was, or what they got up to. Hillman goes on, character refers to the distinctive qualities of an individual. That's a nice summing up. Character refers to the distinctive qualities of an individual. Character has been forming your face, your habits, your friendships, your peculiarities. Character influences the way you give and receive. It affects your loves and your children. It walks you home at night and keeps you long awake. It walks you home at night and can keep you long awake. That first part, it walks you home at night, reminds me of the last sentence of Mumon's commentary on case 44 of the Mumon Khan. And Mumon's referring to our true nature, and it's one of the loveliest passages in the Mumon Khan. It helps you cross the river when the bridge is broken down. It accompanies you when you return to the village on a moonless night. If our character is in tune with our true nature through the practice of Zazen, then we can walk the Buddha way. Another lens that's often applied to character is nature and nurture. A lot of people are familiar with this. Nature is our genetic inheritance, the DNA we've inherited from our parents and our grandparents, also the body that we're born with. That's nature. And nurture is the class of society we were born into, poor family or rich family, middle class, and the way our parents raise us, and the schooling that we get. All these outside influences come under the heading of nurture. So nature, there's often a debate, nature or nurture. And of course, they're both factors in our character development. However, Hillman proposes a third way, and that's his acorn theory, which I find sort of ties in with Buddhist thought. This is what he has to say. Acorn theory holds that each person has a uniqueness that asks to be lived, and that is already present before it can be lived. So straight after we're born, we're this little acorn. It goes on, oaks bear acorns, but acorns are pregnant with oaks. It's a lovely way of putting it. Oaks bear acorns, but acorns are pregnant with oaks. In other words, the moment you were born, you were endowed with great potential. Zen Master Dogen states, when you were born, you could roar like a lion. Thinking about character, I've sort of grown more to appreciate this saying of Dogen's. When you were born, you could roar like a lion. Deeper than character, more intrinsic to your being, is your true nature. It was there before you were born and before your parents were born. And there's Zen koan. What was your original face before your parents were born? What was your original face before your parents were born? Back to Hillman. The acorn theory states that each of us is singled out. The very fact of eachness, he borrows that phrase from another philosopher, that word eachness from another philosopher, the very fact of eachness presumes a unique acorn that characterizes each person. Sun or shade, each has a character. In rare instances, the acorn shouts loud and clear at an early age. In rare instances, the acorn shouts loud and clear at an early age. This is sort of fascinating. Musicians often hear the call first. At 6, Pablo Casals already knew the piano and organ music. Marian Anderson gave her first paid performance. She earned 50 cents. At 8, Mozart, of course, and Mendelssohn too. Even before Mahler could stand, he could hum the tunes he heard. And Verdi's father, to stop his son's pleading, acquired a spinet, which is like a small harpsichord, for Giuseppe, age 7. So Giuseppe Verdi was badgering his father for a small harpsichord at the age of 7. Now get this. John Lennon was expelled from kindergarten. So John Lennon, he was the most rebellious and the most combative Beatle, he had a very sharp, caustic tongue as well. He was rebelled from kindergarten. And of Pablo Picasso, who could never remember the sequence of the alphabet and who left school at 10 because he stubbornly refused to do anything but paint. Little acorn already there. We move into the area of character and calling. That many of us find we have a calling, but often it takes quite a while, many years, before we really find our true calling. But for some famous people, it comes in childhood or in their teens. Then there's Ella Fitzgerald, one of the Black American, one of the greatest voices of the 20th century. Hillman writes, "Consider this event, amateur night at the Harlem Opera House. A skinny, awkward 16-year-old goes fearfully on stage. She is announced to the crowd. The next contestant is a young lady named Ella Fitzgerald. Miss Fitzgerald here is going to dance for us. Hold on. Now, what's your problem, honey? Oh, correction, folks. Miss Fitzgerald has changed her mind. She's not going to dance. She's going to sing." Ella Fitzgerald gave 3 encores and won first prize. However, she was meant to dance, and at the last moment, she decided to sing. In our own Zen tradition, we can pick up some acorns. Here are 3. Hakuin, who just chanted his Zazen Wasen, his dates are 1686 to 1768. He didn't walk till he was 2, but by the age of 3, the suddenly precocious child had memorized every word of all the nursery rhymes and folk songs he had heard. At the age of 4, a visit to the seashore and the sight of the endlessly flowing waves and drifting clouds made the serious little boy burst into tears. So he probably intuitively understood the world's impermanence and also its vastness. So he just burst into tears. And it's reported that as a young child, Hillman, whose dates are 864 to 949, showed signs of great intelligence, and that as a child he learned poems and the entire Buddhist scriptures by heart after a single reading. The young Hillman was also characterized by strong aversion to vulgarity, a tendency to be exemplary and great eloquence. And as a Zen teacher, Hillman was renowned for his tense and pithy responses from questions by his students. What's interesting here is the young Hillman had a strong aversion to vulgarity, because the most outrageous, if you like, koan, especially for people from China and Japan who have strong faith in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, was that one time Hillman was asked, "What is Buddha?" And he replied, "A shit-wiping stick." But as a little boy, it's so interesting that he was characterized by a strong aversion to vulgarity. But on that occasion, he was using vulgarity to shake his student out of any concept that he might have had of the Buddha out there being something perfect and pure. And the last Eastern acorn is Bankei, whose dates are 1622 to 1693. And he was an intelligent, highly sensitive child, but at the same time rather unruly and uncommonly strong-willed. When the boys in his village were divided into two sides for the annual stone-throwing battle, whichever side Bankei was on invariably won, because he would never retreat, no matter how hard the stones rained down on him. And this was later reflected in the great effort that the young Bankei devoted to his zazen. He sat, it was said, until his buttocks bled. He holed himself up in little huts, and that he walled up with only a little gap for a meal to be passed in. And he meditated for days and weeks. So very, very strong-willed in his later practice. Of course, as with most religious biographies, there's a bit of idealization going on. Be that as it may, the characters of Hakuin, Hillman, and Bankei are revealed at a very early age. So we mentioned calling, and Hillman writes about how our character is entwined with our destiny, or our calling, our vocation. We just mentioned especially Ella Fitzgerald breaking into song when she was meant to dance. My father was a lawyer. He and his partner Brian Mann were the first lawyers in Takapuna. And when I was about 4, one of my father's friends leaned over me and asked, "Oh, are you going to follow in your father's footsteps?" And I replied, "No, I'm going to be a bank robber." It was not that I'd set my mind at that stage on becoming a bank robber, although it probably passed through my little mind that if I got arrested, my father would probably get me out of jail. But it was more that, it was rather that I was signalling, no doubt unconsciously, that a conventional career was not for me. and that I wouldn't be following in my father's footsteps, as was the case. So that was my little acorn talking. Amala Roshi realised her calling very clearly in 1986 when we first visited the Rochester Zen Centre for training. During our stay, we took part in our first Jukai, taking the precepts, and attended a triple ordination ceremony. This had a profound effect on Amala. She writes, "I found myself with tears streaming down my face at the ordination ceremony, sure that I now knew what I wanted to do with the rest of my life." So how old were you then? 23, 24, yeah. So that was then that you found your calling. Hillman, interestingly, also mentions how many famous people are wary of biographers coming knocking at their door. He quotes the poet Auden. "My life," Auden said, "is superfluous. The reason you want a biography of me is because of my work. So the I you are searching for is in my work." And Bob Dylan is renowned for making up stories about his childhood. According to the singer, he was a social outcast from a very early age, and that at 13, he ran away to join the circus. And all the stories were later proved to be completely untrue. He had a very conventional upbringing, middle-class upbringing, during which he developed love of music. But it was like his life, his true life, only began in the early 1960s when he arrived in New York and began to sing his songs at cafes and folk clubs in New York. And Roshi Kapleau wasn't very forthcoming about his early years. When we were at the Zen Centre, one member of the Rochester Zen Centre wanted to write his biography, but she found she couldn't get much information out of him. He was very reticent about his teens and what he did in his early 20s. So she actually abandoned the idea of trying to write a biography. His true character and calling, there from the very beginning, came together when he began his Zen training in Japan in 1953 at the age of 41. Of course, this calling and his affinity with Japan was also shaped by the role he played as court reporter at the Nuremberg trials and then at the war trials in Japan at the end of World War II. So the impression that the Japanese people made on him during the World War trials, how they accepted what had happened to them, unlike the German people at the time. And also he was very impressed by the great trees that he encountered in Japanese temples. So this drew him to Japanese culture and then to the study of Zen. Roshi Kapleau suffered from sinus complaints all his life due to a broken nose during his childhood. I remember him telling us that as a 2-year-old, he leapt out of his baby carriage because he was a dragon and he wanted to fly. It was a sort of a self-myth, the dragon being revered as an enlightened creature in China and Japan. In reality, he probably just tumbled out of his carriage and broke his nose. And that crooked nose, along with his wry smile, were very much part of his character. And each of the 4 American Zen teachers that I've encountered, Aiken Roshi, John Daido Lori Roshi, Roshi Kaplo, and of course my teacher, Bowden Roshi, were and are very different in character and expressed their deep understanding of the Dharma in their own unique way. So I'm just going to end on a personal note, but just this evening I was watching, as you do at random, a YouTube clip, and this was Al Pacino, recent interview with Al Pacino, and he said one of the turning moments for him when he was about 6 or 7 was his teacher came to visit his family. He was brought up in a very strict Italian-American family. And his teacher told his mother or his grandmother who was looking after him how Al had a real talent, a real calling for the arts, especially for drama, and how his family should encourage these qualities in him. He wasn't exactly aware of what the teacher said, but that was the upshoot. And his family did. They didn't stand in his way of becoming an actor. So sometimes people in our life can play a really important role in our character development. So just a personal note, sometimes you can gain insight into your own character by something someone says to you. When I was 12 at Belmont Intermediate, I and another boy stayed behind in the classroom while the rest of the class went to nearby Takapuna Grammar School for a swimming lesson. Belmont Intermediate didn't have a swimming pool, so we used Takapuna Grammar. Don't know why I stayed behind. I might have had a cold. But anyway, and everyone left their exercise books open on the desks. And so there was this little boy and I alone in the classroom, and we were probably very bored. And those were the days of fountain pens. And so he picked up our fountain pens and had a very intense ink fight, flicking ink all over the classroom and onto everyone's books. And of course, we got into big trouble when the class returned from their swimming lesson. What I do remember is my teacher sitting down with me after the class, and she wasn't angry, but she said to me, "You are a good, well-behaved student, Richard. But on the odd occasion, you can just go wild." On the odd occasion, so there was a little insight I got at 12 into my character. I think I exercised a lot of that wildness when I performed with our punk band, The Plague, in the late 1970s, throwing myself about the stage. In contrast, as a Zen student, especially in the early days, I might describe myself as quiet and steady going. On receiving my first Raksu, my teacher gave me the Dharma name Stillbrook, and I never really resonated with that name Stillbrook. However, Bowden Roshi, with his dynamism, was exactly the teacher that I needed. I think of his character traits of impulsiveness, energy, and commitment. And these last two character traits, energy and commitment, make him such a great teacher. And I'm so grateful to have him as my teacher. working on mu, particularly towards the end of a 7-day sesshin, I would sometimes cut loose in the Doksan room and manifest a bit of my wildness. It was a way of flinging myself out of myself, of opening up to mu. So that happened on a few occasions. Okay, so I'm going to end there. In Zen and Character, Part 2, we'll look at 3 main areas: aging and character, karma and character, and the precepts and character. So this will be our three topics, our 3 subtopics. We've got a little time left. Has anybody got any comments or questions about Zen and character? Okay.
I gave the wrong name and amount as my how old I was.
Yes, you were older.
28.
You were
28.
28, yes, that's what I thought. Okay, you were 28 at the time of the ordination. Well, as I look around the Zendo, I can't help thinking, what a group of unique characters. We'll stop here and recite the 4 vows. The teaching you have received is offered freely. If you would like to make a donation to support the continuation of this podcast service or learn more about practice opportunities at the Auckland Zen Centre, please visit www.aucklandzen.org.nz.